All right, what's up? It's Tuesday. My first plan for today was just to do a regular crit and try to dig down on some of the pieces you guys turned in. But I think there's been a pretty big problem for everybody so far, every single one, which is just not making very much progress. Even the stuff that's farthest along right now still just looks like I would say a 2 or 3 hour sculpt to my eyes, and you guys are coming up on 2 weeks working on this. I think you've had 12 days since the assignment was sort of started. So if you spent just 2 hours a day sculpting so far, that would be 24 whole hours in ZBrush. And I'm just not seeing 24 hours worth of work in the sculpts right now. So my concern sort of is I can give you guys feedback, but if like you're not producing the work fast enough to act on that feedback before you run out of time, or like I can tell you a bunch of things to change in each of the ones that I'm looking at right now, but if it took a week and a half to get to where it is now, I can't see those changes being fully incorporated and polished by Friday, which is when, to my understanding, the sculpt is supposed to be done. And I think none of these are on track to be done by Friday. In fact, one thing that I would say is, maybe this is something where you guys aren't clear, but I would not try to have don't try to be finishing, Thursday night and getting all your shapes in. You should try to have your shapes done, in the first 50% of the time you have allotted. And then the second 50% is spent improving it. Because I think if you get your first try done only at the last second, then you're never going to have anything other than your first try. And I think that it prevents you from sort of improving what you've already made, and that prevents you from learning as effectively. Anyway, the point of this isn't really to make you guys feel bad or guilty or anything, but I think it's sort of a moment to pump the brakes and be like, okay, this is a big problem. Any other crit I have is going to be secondary to this one big problem that everybody is facing right now. And I can give notes on, change this arm or something, but like, really, that's not going to be as helpful, or it's not going to make as big of a difference to your guys' work and improvement in future and all that as dealing with this this speed issue. So right now, just as an example, I said it looks like 2 or 3 hours of work, and I know there's people who are very experienced are going to work a lot faster than people who are inexperienced. But this is Michael Pavlovich. He's a very good ZBrush sculptor, and this is him working for 3 hours. I just brought this up as a good example. And if I just skip toward the end and we take a look at, what has he gotten done in this 3 hours? And he's not even necessarily trying to finish something in 3 hours, but try to find a good part where he's zoomed out here. So this is his character so far in 3 hours. And it looks to me farther along with a lot more stuff going on than everything I'm seeing on the drive right now. And that's not great, because again, like, everybody has different amounts of time, but like 2 hours a day is not a big ask if this is your BFA graduating senior class. You don't have another class that's this important. Even if you have a job, that's taking a ton of your time. 1 hour a day is still 12 hours, which should get you reasonably far. So anyway, the point is, I don't know why this is happening. I'm not sure if if it's because of procrastination, or because you spent all your free time on thesis stuff and neglected this assignment, or if you really did spend a full 60 hours on this character, and you're just having workflow issues that are preventing you from getting anywhere with it. It's impossible for me to really know just from looking at sculpts. So I'd really like to get to the bottom of this, because I want this to be I think this is a point where if we can improve it, it'll make everything after this go a lot better. And something I suggested earlier in the semester, and nobody took me up on it, was for some of you guys to just record your working process for like 2 or 3 straight hours. Because I think that is really where, you know, if you guys are working, you know, 30, 60 hours a week, or not 60 hours a week, 30 hours a week is sort of what we budget at work. Because, you know, you work 40 hours and then you just knock 10 off for meetings, lunch, everything distracting that might happen during the day. And that's usually a safe, low number that can increase if it has to. But anyway, I think, you know, that's a reasonable amount of hours, 30 per week, to budget for homework too, especially for a BFA class where this is, you know, supposed to be your you know, you're investing in your career. So anyway, where was I? Yeah, so like if you guys are spending that much time already, and you're not getting very much progress, then I think that's something that we can fix. I don't think that's an unfixable problem. And I think that if we could dial in on what's causing that issue for everybody and get you guys working faster, I think, yeah, the results will multiply and grow exponentially for the rest of the semester, rest of the year, and for rest of all time. So yeah, I think like if you guys want to do this, I would be happy to like watch videos of you guys just working on these characters and see, you know, what's happening. That's because I'm very unsure of what is causing each, you know, model to be so unfinished at this stage. And again, like I don't mean this as a shaming or anything at all. Like I really do want to find out what we can do to make you guys get more out of the time you put in. Because if you're putting in that much time, like you deserve to get more out of it. So anyway, OBS Studio is the best free thing to record your screen. And yeah, like I'm not going to demand that anybody do this. This is opt-in, but I really do think it would make a huge difference moving forward if I could get some just footage of people working. Because yeah, like a lot of the stuff that you guys have, and I'll go through it real quick in a second. A lot of it is good. Like you've made good improvements since last time. It's just not very much. It's like what I would expect to see after a day, you know, of crits. Like, and it's like, cool, yes, that's headed in the right direction. Now do the rest of it. But if you don't have time to do the rest of it because it took this long to get this far, then it's not as beneficial. So yeah, I would really love to get to the bottom of this. I'm just going to look at models now, but yes, please keep in mind what I'm saying here, because I think this is, you know, a big deal, is why I put it up front and am talking about it for so long. I think this is a huge deal and something that could really make a difference. I will stop harping on it now and move on to some models. Once again, I'm gonna touch on this one more time. Stuff's due at 5. I want a Z tool, not a Z project. I want things at 1080p. All the stuff I said before. You know, again, in a work environment, if someone has to remind you of that stuff once, it's okay. If they have to remind you of it 2 times, they're gonna be pissed. If they have to remind you of it 3 times, you're in like serious trouble. So, you know, there's no consequences for this at school, but you guys should definitely be aware that you can't just be habitually turning stuff in incorrect or turning stuff in late. Like, you have to be able to meet the brief. It's not a casual, maybe try to do that, you know? So try to work on disciplining yourselves and being able to pay attention to instructions, because it really matters and really makes a difference in like your employability. It doesn't matter if you're really good if you can't, you know, follow instructions. Anyway, let's look at models. Okay, so first of all, looking at this guy, first, huge improvement. I really appreciate the attention to the feedback from last week. Like, really, the shapes are way more pushed. It's definitely much closer to the reference, and yeah, I definitely see you trying to get those gestures and shapes in there, which is fantastic. I think obviously like it's not finished and needs more time and work, um, but it's definitely much more on the right track. I would say the one thing I would work on, in addition to just getting it finished, is try to get the likeness a little closer. I would say going into the reference, nice choice of a style guide too. I think that's a good choice, and that should work with that concept art. Um, I feel like you could pay closer attention to the specifics of the concept. Like he's got the side of his head completely shaved, and you've given him like hair on the side. I think his hair altogether doesn't super match. Um, and you know stuff like where is he? If you look at the shape of his nose, it's sort of his face is sort of almost concave, and his nose goes almost straight down from his sort of thick brow, and a lot of those sort of facial features you have done sort of differently. I think you're maybe working from other reference or or I don't know, sculpting on autopilot, which happens. Whatever it is, like this is not a bad face. It's just not quite the guy in the concept that you're working from. And when you're using, you know, other reference, you want to be using this reference to fill the gaps, but not to replace stuff that you can see in the concept. And stuff that I can see, you know, like his hair, like obviously this isn't super well defined, but you can sort of figure out what kind of haircut this is and see that he has a complete, you know, buzz on the side, shape of his nose, all that type of stuff, is stuff I would try to look very closely at. You know, I haven't looked super closely at the rest of his body, but same goes for that, just in getting those proportions and details. So try to get it a little closer to the likeness, I would say. But definitely, I see you making strong choices about shapes and edges and stuff, and that's really good. That is definitely headed in the right direction, and you're thinking in the right way, I think, which is good. Yeah, I feel like it looks like a lot of this stuff is very warped, which is fine. That'll happen when you start making, you know, big moves, big distortions of the figure to hit a concept or whatever. I would say before you start seriously sculpting on it, you know, maybe do some Z remeshing or whatever you can to sort of even this stuff out and make sure it's easy to sculpt on. You know, because you don't necessarily want a bunch of super stretched out faces like that. You want to keep things relatively even quads. So yeah, just make sure you try to clean stuff up as you go. But yeah, I think this is headed in the right direction. Same stuff as I said at the beginning applies. I'd like to see more progress. I don't know what are your biggest challenges when you're working that are preventing you from doing more faster. But I'd definitely be happy to try and dig into that and figure out ways that we can continue moving forward faster. But yeah, nice job. Okay. Yeah. Again, looking at the JP's disturbing goblin thing. Again, big improvement from before. Still some things I would say. One of them, just off the bat, is it looks like it's not straight up and down. It looks like the whole figure is like tilted backward. And I remember when I looked at it last week, it looked like you had it more straight up and down, but the feet were tilted down. And this looks like maybe you just addressed that by rotating it back, but now it looks very off balance. That's something I'm not sure what's going on there or why that is the case. But something you guys should all try to do, and I think this is something Sheldon and them talk about in figure drawing, but like if you have a figure, you know, you want it to be centered, you want its center of gravity to be supported by the feet or whatever, you know, and something like that is usually good. I think I don't remember the exact rule, but you want to like draw down from the head, and I can't draw a straight line. You want basically the center of gravity, wherever that is, to have the foot basically supporting it, under it. Like if you have somebody who's like leaning way back, then you're gonna need support like way back here, and that means maybe the leg goes like that, or whatever. Again, like it's about where the center of mass is on the body, where most of the weight is, and you basically but you basically need to have the feet like supporting wherever that center mass is. So yeah, if you have something like where the feet are here, but then the body's tilted back, that means all this mass is to the right of the feet or behind the feet, and that's not going to stay up. So you want to make sure that reads, because I think that's something that human beings can sense intuitively. Intuitively, I feel like, oh no, they're going to fall over. So that's something to watch out for. As far as sculpting, you've come a long way. I like the feet. I think that's been done pretty well. Let me look at the concept again. Let me see. I would like these to be more even. These two toes look good, and then this one is like weirdly shrunk. I think when I'm looking at the concept, it looks like what he did was he put gold rings around some of the toes. But the toes are all the same size as each other, so I'm not sure if this is meant to be the ring or something, but it's not reading to me really. If it was me, I would do the ring in like Maya or something and add that on. I think this is an example of VizDev artists writing checks that we can't cash as modelers, but like this webbing would actually block the ring from going all the way around the the toe. So unless it's just half a ring, which I don't understand, maybe it clamps around the outside. That's the sort of thing that we modelers have to deal with and sort of solve once we make the character, So like when you get to something like this, you're like, all right, so this doesn't work. Maybe the web is split. Maybe it broke off because this guy's been through the war, or maybe the ring or whatever isn't a complete circle. Maybe it's like a clamp, like a wristband or something. Anyway, stuff like that. You want to figure that stuff out before you make it, and then once you make it, you go in confident about what you're going to make and that it will make sense. Because a lot of the time, VizDev artists will draw things that are easy to draw, but they don't necessarily make sense when you think about it in 3 dimensions. I would say, same thing again, not enough progress. I understand you restarted a lot of times, which, that's good. If you're learning something each time you start over, that's good. And I would say, for me, that's more important than getting the character done on time for this particular thing. But yeah, I would say keep going. Try to bring it to a good level of finish. I would say, the modeling of the clothes still needs to happen. So definitely still do that. But also, like, there's a lot more that could be done with the figure and the body and the head too. I'm gonna say don't necessarily change this just because I said it, because this is ambiguous. You only have the one drawing, but to me the shading on this makes me think of like more of a shark shape like that than what you've done, which is like a toad guy like that. Like this looks like it comes to a point here, and there's definitely a plane change all the way around, which is something like that, that's how this shape reads to me. Actually, the mouth is up higher. But maybe if that's too much time and hassle to change, or if you don't agree with my interpretation, then don't necessarily change it, but maybe just think about that for next time. Because I feel like to me this would be a lot closer to the concept. But I would say, if you're confident in the one you have, I would go for it. But yeah, even let me see. Most of this skin isn't covered, and I would like the arms too. So I would try to find some anatomy reference and go in on the muscles. Don't use this as anatomy reference because it's pretty rough, but try to get some of that made. I think you're making progress on the hands, but there's still a lot that can be done to sort of be more specific with your forms, like make solid choices, because I think there's a lot of bumps and sort of facets around these legs that to me they don't look like they were super intentional choices about anatomy or anything. They're just sort of inconsistent sculpting, or like down here, that's not really what a knee looks like. Actually, I guess that doesn't matter this time because you're going to be covering it anyway. But for the areas that are exposed, you want to make sure you're, getting some good reference about, how does a wrinkly belly look and whatever, all this stuff. Like, yeah, I would say anatomy is going to help, or not anatomy, reference is going to help you there. But definitely making progress. Like, I see you guys moving forward, even if it's not as fast as I would like. It's definitely you're headed in the right direction, which is why I want to help you guys move faster and get more out of the time you put in, because like I see you addressing feedback and making improvements, and if you can multiply your results from the time you put in, then it's going to be that much better at the end. So yeah, I think this is headed in the right direction. Good work. Okay, this one. Yeah, big improvements on the face since last time. I like the way you've done the eyelashes too. That's a nice stylistic choice. I would say, repeating myself, more work I would like to see. The body still looks like a quick block out. It doesn't look like a finished body. The head still doesn't look done. Hair especially doesn't look done. There's more stuff you can do in the face. I think the lips look like a start, but they're not fully defined. Like, usually you have like a plane change here. There's a lot of, anatomy happening in the chin that you could start to, shape out just a little bit more. Even if you're doing a simplified stylized character, you can get sort of the hints of those shapes, and you have a lot of shapes here, but they're just sort of blurry. They're not fully brought out. They're not fully defined. Especially like, the nose here has a pretty obvious crease on everybody, and you would want to like get that sculpted in, and maybe, I don't know, find opportunities to add more structure to this face, because I think it's still a little bit blurry looking. You've done a good job on the eyes here, and the likeness is closer, but yeah, there's, I think, still more to do. I think with the hair, this looks like maybe dynameshed, and I like this confident shape from the front, the way you're getting these. I think that looks really good. But I think that once you get into like the side view, this super just flat thing, like she ran into a wall, I think is not quite working. And this is the hard part of translating 2D concepts into 3D, where you have to sort of make them work. And I think this side isn't super working. I think front looks great, back looks pretty great, but it starts to have problems from the side in particular. The bow, I think, like, I looked at the VizDev and you have some pretty specific instructions on the bow, which is cool, but like looking at this side view, it's got like thickness to it, like it's all been extruded, and I don't think any bow looks like that. You know what I mean? So this is one of those things where you want to be using photo reference to fill in the knowledge gaps that is left by the VizDev. Like, if you don't know what the cross section of this bow looks like, then you can find enough pictures of bows to sort of figure that out. And I think like this doesn't, like, from the front you're getting these shapes, but from any other angle this doesn't really read as a bow because it's been, it's got this thickness to it, and it it just doesn't quite make sense. Like, try to figure out how is a bow assembled. What does it look like untied, and then how are those shapes bent into shape and tied together to create what we see as a bow? Because I think right now this looks like a cookie or something, or a cake. So that's not what you want. I think for the hair, it's very cool to see you going for these spiral shapes. That's a tricky thing to do. I think you're on the right track, but you're sort of just drawing. I feel like you're drawing onto these volumes with the clay buildup, and you're not like making confident three-dimensional decisions. Like, this is sort of just drawn on top, and you want to like cut deep into it, and get these shapes the way that you want them, because otherwise it's gonna look like it lacks depth. And this is hard because if you mess up, then you don't have a good shape. But making these bold cuts into the shape, I think, is what really gets you good sculpting mileage. If you're always sort of afraid to, and I think this is the classic problem in learning ZBrush. Everybody's always afraid to really, really make big damaging changes to the surface, So you end up getting these sort of blurry characters with very light detail on them, but they don't have big volume choices being made. And so, like, I would say, yeah, like, don't be afraid to get in there, and you can always undo it if you screw up, but like, really just jump in there and make big choices first, and you can always come in and do subtle choices and add subtle details afterward. But yeah, I would keep going. I think, like, keep pushing to try to get as close to the viz dev as you can. It's definitely, it's definitely very stylized, and you'll have to make some decisions about how you resolve it in 3D. But this is definitely a lot closer in likeness to the drawing than before, so that's really good. One thing I would say is the hair. I am not a hair expert, but I feel like the amount of like volume you have down here is really weird when you see how tiny the sort of connecting part is here, where you have, like, how is all this hair fitting into this tiny little area up here? You'd think, obviously, like, it curls and that adds volume down at the bottom, but you'd still want to see, like, I don't know, something. This would require like some reference gathering, I think, or knowledge that I don't have to make this work. But I feel like it doesn't make sense to have hair that's like this very thin, concentrated hair, and then it all comes out at the bottom. That looks like a big ladle. But yeah, you get the idea. I would say maybe just try to add a little more sense to it. Maybe you can have some higher curls up here. I don't know. I don't want to overrule your designers or whatever, but yeah, I think there's stuff that can be done here to add a bit more volume. Up here looks good. I think this needs tightening up. Like, it's a good first step, but obviously it needs more sculpting done to finish it. And then this piece on the side looks like it doesn't have the confident shapes of the other side. Like, these, I see some very deliberate choices about where to put the hair, and this is just sort of a, it looks like a flank steak or something. So you want to, I don't know, whatever is happening here, you got to decide what's happening, and then execute it in the way that you did this. So, do more of that to that side and the back and stuff. But yeah, I think, again, making progress. So good job. Okay, this dude. Yeah, good progress. I'm really liking the arms. The anatomy on the arms is looking good to my untrained eyes. Yeah, I'm gonna be a broken record here, but again, I would want to see a lot more progress. You know, like if you can get all this stuff done by Friday, then that's great. But ideally, you would want to have stuff like this all in, much earlier, and then you have the option to start doing nice detailing work and really bringing detail and subtlety into the project. And if you're here on Tuesday, I can't see everything. I can't imagine that everything I would want to see is going to get in by Friday. And, obviously you can go back and be behind schedule or whatever for the coming weeks and continue to detail it. But like, really, I would want to see it done on time and having all that stuff. But anyway, I think like, the shapes are good. I think you really went for the proportions of this guy, even though they're pretty crazy, which is great to see. I don't know if you're gonna make his weapons. That would be pretty awesome. But anyway, yeah, I think this is on the right track. We talked about refining the sculpt, and I would say, like, as an example, let's like go in on his helmet or whatever his hat thing this is. Like, what have we got here? One thing I see is this line. I hope the cursor is showing up. Last time it didn't show up, and all my gesticulations were not captured by the software. But there's a line here. Did I draw that on the same layer? Yes, I did. Let me see. There's a line here where this is split into two pieces. Obviously there's some additional detail shapes here and here. This is like cut out, and then we have various details. There's like this disc thing in here, and then on that side you can't really see what's going on. But Star Wars has a lot of merchandise and a lot of pictures of it, so you can always go in and look at Star Wars crap and try to figure out like what are some good shapes that look Star Warsy that I can use to fill in the gaps of my knowledge with this character, because maybe I don't know exactly what usually I don't know exactly what's happening in this area. It's hard to see it from this angle, but you can find things that look close enough and then use your creativity to try to make that work. For the face, like, obviously this is a pretty good drawing. You have a good amount of information, but if you want to take it to a more detailed level, you can always go to the the source, see what kind of high level detail is happening that Jake Parker has simplified out. But going back here, yeah, so there's a lot that can be done in terms of that kind of thing. I think, again, shapes are good. The head is looking good. But even now, like, there's detail happening on, like, what is going on here? I'm actually not sure. Need new layer. That's what it is. Okay, yeah. There's detail in the sort of the way this is folding and the sort of, the roughness and messiness of his facial features, because, this guy he's been through it. He's got a lot of imperfections on his face. All this stuff is meaningful, and all this stuff is stuff you should try to capture in your model, and not just the basics. Down here on the neck too, this is looking super waddled and nasty. His jowls are coming down here. All that stuff, like, try to capture it. Try to, if you're not sure what these lines are implying, that's another place where you can go in and look at this guy or look at, human reference, and really try to just get those details. Because, this is a good block in. This is a good first pass. But then you got to start, continuing, keep going, because it's not getting all the stuff that happens on these guys. And again, like, if it's a stylized character, you might not want to get all of it. You might not want to get this level of detail, but you can put it in spots, maybe just a little bit more around the eyes, maybe around here. And you can figure out, like, maybe I'm going to leave out some of the forehead wrinkles or some of, maybe all these nose wrinkles I don't need to model because it's a cartoon version, but like, you know, maybe a little more around the eye or whatever. Stuff like that. Like look for opportunities to also contrast hard edges with smooth round things, because I think on the movie sculpt, like you have these, you know, these sharp edges here and here that are really nice, and then you have these big round shapes, which is, you know, like a human face, but it's also designed like you've got some wrinkly folds here and here, and then you've got this area of rest where there's not a lot of detail, or up here, you know, and it's appealing to look at when a character has these sort of spot details that are very sharp and very clear, and then other areas that aren't. And I think everything on here right now is a little bit sort of the same in terms of how smooth it is, and you would benefit, I think, from spot detailing around, you know, around the eyes, around the nose, sort of the points of interest, really, and make sure that even if you're not taking it to the movie level of detail, you're still doing you're still sharpening it up where you want people to be looking. Like up here too would probably work. And then, you know, as far as the helmet, this picture is pretty low res, so I'm not sure, but you know, obviously you want to get that detail in there. And like, here's what I would say is try to think about how is this thing fabricated? Either in fiction or, you know, imagining that it's a movie prop. A lot of this type of thing in a movie is like vac formed plastic, so that means that it's usually sculpted out of clay or something to create the mold. You know, and so like try to get those shapes in there. I think right now you have it sort of very boxy and square, and I feel like in the drawing it's a little bit more swoopy and curved, because again, I think it probably, well, he's not, obviously he's not drawing a real object, but he's imitating the style of movie props that were made, you know, a certain way, and I would like to see more of that shape language reflected here. You know, try to figure out, even if it's not a hard plane change, like figure out the volume of it and try to get it accurate, because like this looks like it tapers, it's wider at the back and then narrower here, and then let me see, turn that back off again. Like you have that big swoopy shape, and then right when it gets to the edge, I actually think it looks like it's the inset is pretty sharp. You know, so once you go in and do that, try to think about those cross sections and the way the volumes fit together. And yeah, don't be afraid to like separate this out. It looks a little bit to me like his helmet is sort of interpenetrating with his head right here. You know, and you want to like separate it a little bit, at least up front. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, I want it to look like a helmet that's sitting on his head and not another mesh that was extruded or whatever. You know, don't make me think about 3D modeling. I want to think about this cool pig guard. But yeah, I think this is looking good. Just needs to make a lot more progress. But I think it's headed in the right direction. So nice job. For the villager, again, seeing a lot of good improvements here. I think the face still a little sort of narrow and tall for me as compared to the reference. The proportions of it, I think, are not quite where I would want to see them, but major improvements. I think like you're making much more decisive choices about shape, which is really cool to see, especially like here and here. So I see that happening, and it's definitely improving the model quite a lot. Yeah, like again, not as much as I would want to see. I think there's like the thing about making this progress is like if it was farther along, you could start dealing with stuff like the ribbing on this lantern. Like, you know, a real paper lantern with stuff like this is going to have a little bit, you know, of a bump around here where each of these is. You know, you would be able to model the inside. you'd be able to start dealing with this more seriously, because I see you've started, but it doesn't, basically, actually, well, I'll get to that. I don't want to get distracted right away. But yeah, there's a lot that can be done on top of what you've done already. And being able to get those big shapes and big decisions in early really helps in being able to sort of refine it afterward. So, yeah, let me see. I think one thing I would say, just as a minor point, the symmetry you have on here is not it's not I actually, looking at it now, it looks like you don't have it symmetrical on the outer sides, but when you have this middle part be very symmetrical, it looks like, my brain assumed that you had the entire thing symmetrical, and I didn't even look at the rest. So, try to make that a little bit more asymmetrical, because it actually makes you look lazier than you actually are, because, again, looking at it now, these are very, very different. So I would just say, like, this shape here doesn't have to be wildly different, but just enough that it doesn't look like you sculpted it with symmetry. Oops, I did that thing again. All right. Let me see. Oh yeah, so the thing I wanted to talk about with this one is going back to sort of how we deal with concept art, because there's some stuff happening in the concept art that I think is difficult. I mentioned last week that I feel like this shape isn't well defined, and I think that extends to up here too. So here's one thing that I'm noticing is you started to encounter this, I see, with your piece, where there's like a strap for the lantern that goes under the chin, and then like when it meets the head scarf here, it just goes into it. And maybe there's just like a slit cut in it, but that seems really unlikely, and it doesn't look plausible to me. It looks really strange, in fact, and it still looks strange. It looks, I'd say, even more strange when you model it, because, when you're modeling something, people expect more clear decisions about form. When you're drawing something like this, you can sort of get away with this stuff because people aren't looking at that stuff very closely. But yeah, when you're modeling it, it just, you can't do that. And I see you've basically replicated what the concept art did. What I would say is, like, looking at sort of this shape, what would make more sense to me is I see this part of the cloth being like pulled forward, and it's a different layer than this part here. And so I would expect maybe the strap from the lantern to go down over this part, and then have this other area, this other part of the cloth, go over it, because it then emerges down here. Sorry if you can't see what I'm gesturing at. It emerges down here. That makes more sense to me, because the folded part is being pulled across the face, and now we have sort of more of a sensible thing happening here, and you'd then have to clean it up here, and there's more to do. But that's sort of the stuff you have to do as a modeler, is figure out what shapes are actually here. If that's not obvious, then you have to sort of just make a decision. You got to make a judgment call about, like, what are these what are these shapes gonna be, and then you just do it, even if it's not completely reflected in the concept. And that's one of those places where photo reference or other reference can come in handy. I would say try to be solving those 3D problems, because at work, when I'm doing stuff from concepts, a lot of the time there's stuff that doesn't make sense, and it's stuff that's easy to miss when you're painting or drawing, that oh, that doesn't work, oh, I didn't notice that, and you could send it back to the viz dev artist every time and say, I want you to do me a turnaround and fix all this stuff, but like, that's not really feasible a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, as an artist, you should be able to deal with that and figure out the intent of the drawing or the painting, and be able to create something that's more refined and more resolved than what you were given. So that's something I would say for that. I think the same goes for down here again. I'm not even sure if this, sorry, I'm not even sure if this cloth piece here couldn't be an entirely separate one. And that might actually make your life easier in terms of sculpting, even if it's not really a separate piece in a real headdress or something. You know, like you could at least make it separate and then merge it back together once you're done sculpting it, you know. But I feel like trying to get that type of shape, that folded over cloth just out of one piece of mesh with this strap also involved, it's asking a lot of yourself. And you could really sort of resolve a lot of this stuff and separate these pieces out and work on them one at a time, and I think it would make your life a lot easier. That's what I would say about that. This is very thick, and I know that's the concept, so maybe that's the right call. That's a tricky one, because I feel like that looks very strange, but you know, and also this cloth up here seems to be the same fabric, and it's definitely not as thick as it's drawn down here. So that's kind of a judgment call. There's tricky stuff going on in this piece, and I don't want to be too prescriptive about how you deal with it. I think you're on the right track. Let me see again, front view. I wish I could see the legs. Let me see. Try to bring up my other tabs. What we got? I can't see the legs. That sucks. Maybe you're not ready to show those yet. Yeah, I think, did I close ZBrush? What's going on here? I didn't have ZBrush open. I was looking at Photoshop. Yeah, I think, but even thickness or not, like, I feel like you're starting to make strong shape decisions and line decisions, which is really good. I would want to see more straight lines based on the concept. There's a lot of, these are very straight lines, right? That's a little bit curved, but generally speaking, like, this is very straight. This is straight. This is straight. You know, I think I mentioned this last week too, but lots and lots of straight lines. There's some folding happening on the inside here, and there's curves happening down here, but where things can be straight, they tend to be pretty straight. Legs too, very, very straight lines, which is just sort of the shape language here. Here's like another great example. This probably wouldn't be this perfectly geometrical, but it's like, you know, 3 straight lines across the top. So that's another thing to look at. This is pretty straightened, the way these folds are happening. As far as the thing across the face, like, this definitely looks to me like it's a oh, I drew on it again. Sad. This definitely looks to me like it's a twisted up continuation of this this piece of cloth, rather than like a rope that's attached to it, and it looks like you have it as a separate subtool, which is a good way to start, to be honest. But eventually you may want to, like I said, separate out like this piece as its own subtool, and then merge it with this one, dynamesh them or something, and try to sculpt that out so that it actually looks like it's going from a flat plane of fabric into this twisted piece. But let me see. Yeah, oh yeah, I was talking about straight lines. So yeah, a lot of these you have as sort of swoopy curves, S-curves, and you want to get them, try to wrangle them into straight shapes. If it was me, I'd say fuck it and just do it in Maya. But do whatever makes you most comfortable. It looks like these are more straight than before, which I love. I would say, I don't know about this shape that you're getting on the insides. I would say maybe going back to the reference, I'm seeing more like a bunch of folds that are going up like this, you know, and maybe those folds are somewhat parallel with the up and down of the body, something like that, or whatever you think is good in your judgment. But I would say maybe they're folding to get the, like, you're getting a stepping pattern as they fold, which is making it wider at the bottom. But I wouldn't have it just arc down like I don't know if that's probably too hard to see on the stream, but you're having it sort of arc out like that, and I would say make it more like try to keep some of those straight lines in there. And down here, the whole belt, I think you've got the pieces, which is good. That's a good start, but the shapes aren't good. Like this belt, like from the shading, it looks very pillowy, like a real belt has this cross section, and yours looks like it's shaped like that, which is, or like that, which is not, the way this shading sort of gradates on it, and that goes for all of it, goes for this and this and this. All that stuff looks very round and not like a real solid piece of leather or whatever this belt is made out of. And this stuff is ambiguously drawn, but I would say try to make graphic shape decisions even with the details here, because I think that's what makes this piece so appealing. You want your shape language with like this belt and stuff to match even like the backpack and the way this is, chunky and square. I think that's what's going to work the best on this piece. But yeah, once again, I do see a lot of progress. I'm nitpicking a lot of this a little bit, but I think that's because it's really headed in the right direction, and I think like continuing to push those straight lines and those graphic shapes is going to give you a lot of it's going to yield good results for you. So nice work. And last but not least, the witch character. I don't think I got to talk about this last time, or maybe I forgot. But yeah, this one's really interesting because I think the concept is really appealing at first glance, but it also has some really indecisive stuff in it that is already or will be challenging for you to deal with. Like one of them is that we were looking at was the hat, where there's like this additional shape, this fold here happening, and it's really not clear to me from this drawing or the other one, like, is this like a hat band around it, or is it part of the hat that's sort of collapsed down onto itself, which like an accordion, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's very vague. This shape is very different too from the one in the other drawing. So, stuff like that is very difficult for a modeler to figure out, how to make that work. So I think the shape you've given it here is reasonable. I don't really understand how this hat is constructed or why still, but I think this looks more legible as a shape than this. So I think that's an improvement. Yeah, once again, like this is a few days worth of work from what I would see, and I would love to see how we can get more out of the time, because for 2 weeks I think this is just not where I would want to, or not where I would expect to see a ZBrush sculpt or any model. But I think you're making pretty good decisions with proportion and shape here. Like I love the tiny feet. One thing I would say is it looks like you used maybe a base mesh or something for the face, and it's super weird to see this very stylized, character with the concept actually has like a very like anime undetailed face, and to see this like sort of realistic one in here is very unsettling. And I think I would not do that. I would not try to use a base mesh for a face that's this, or at least a base mesh that's so different from what your concept character looks like. I think figuring out how to make this face in 3D is a challenge all on its own, and just sort of using a realistic human face is it's not gonna work out, I would say. It already looks it looked more strange before when you could see more of it, but still I feel like weird about it. Another issue with the concept that we were looking at is like it's really unclear why this cape is like sticking out so much at the back. It's like billowing out with a lot of airspace in between it and the body, it looks like, and it's not super clear to me what's supporting it or if it's just floating out there. I think in 3D if you replicated that correctly, it would look really strange. So it already looks like you're sort of revising it and making it work a little bit more in 3 dimensions, which is good. But I do think there are shapes here that are happening that you're not quite picking up. Like the way the benefit of having it stick out like this is that it sort of hangs straight down in a straight line. And you have given it this sort of, you know, this looks like a not very confident shape where it's flaring and curved and it's not very precise to me, you know, and that's tricky because you don't want it to stick way out without reason, but then, you know, you do want to get sort of the straight down or close to straight down directionality of it. Let me see. Actually make a drawing layer. So that's one thing I would say. Tabbing back and forth. This is the same artist as the other one, so you know a lot of the same stuff applies in terms of try to exaggerate your straight lines and your graphic shapes. You know, these, whatever these are, I think these are looking better than before, but they're definitely like layered pieces, and you want to emphasize that layering. And again, yeah, this is an improvement, but like make sure that this isn't all just fading into one line with details on it, but like these are solid, confident like statements about this is a layer on top of that layer. You know, this is straight, this is straight. But yeah, giving them some depth and thickness, and also like instead of, you know, the way this guy works, I think, is even when you don't have a perfectly straight line, even if you're doing a curve, it still gets pushed toward a squarer shape. So instead of like a curve like that, you might have something like that, you know? It's something sort of halfway between a very faceted geometric shape and a straight curve where you've got very rounded corners, but you've still got sort of the feeling of straight lines in there. And I think like areas like the way this thing curves, I'm seeing a bit of that, like, you know, in there. I'm exaggerating it for effect, but like, you know, this artist likes sort of straight lines. This is very straight. You know, this stuff. I would look for opportunities to straighten your lines out, and you know, sometimes it's in contrast to round shapes like this one. But here you have a bunch of straights and then, you know, a bit of a curve on that side. Yeah, look for your opportunities to push the shape language and the shape design of this character, because I think that's a big part of what makes it appealing, in addition to the proportions, which I think you're getting pretty well. And yeah, there's definitely weird stuff happening that doesn't necessarily work very well in 3D, and that'll be difficult. But as long as you identify those challenges and like try to find your own solutions to them, rather than just sort of copying the art without analyzing what's problematic about it. Look at those hands. Yeah, I feel like these don't reflect the art very well. It looks like she's got giant fingers, maybe just two glove fingers here and a giant thumb, is what I'm seeing here. And, you know, this looks like a base mesh that maybe you started with that's not really reflexive of your concept. So that's something to watch out for too, is like really try to honor those design decisions that the artist makes. And that's what's going to make your model appealing, because a lot of people are out there trying to model concept art, and when they get to a thing like this crazy blocky hand, you know, they retreat back to a safe shape like this. And being able to really reach for those tough design choices and you know, and bring them into 3D in a way that honors the concept art is what's going to make your model stand out as like an artistic statement. So if you can do that, try to do that, because it really makes a difference. But yeah, I mean, like, there's a long way to go in getting these basic blockout shapes right, and I think once that's done, there's going to be even longer to go in getting all the detail that's happening, all these little things. So that's, you know, that's a challenge if this thing is due if your sculpt is due on Friday or whatever, because I would see at the rate you're going, I would see, you know, 4 or 5 more weeks of sculpting, based on what is done so far. And that seems maybe unfeasible, you know, and I don't mean to pick on this one in particular because like this is basically true of all of them, but like if you wanted to keep going at the current rate of progress, a lot of these could end up pretty good, but it would take so much longer than we've spent already. And it shouldn't take that long. There should be more done by now. So once again, you know, beating a dead horse, but I would really love to see some people's workflow, what you guys are doing on a minute to minute basis, excuse me. And figure out how we can get more value out of your guys' time, because it shouldn't take this long to get this far. So hopefully that's something we can look at and improve for next week. But yeah, once again, like I feel like the proportions are working pretty well. I think you could probably still push them even more. I feel like maybe the hat's even bigger. I mean, obviously the feet are just like little spikes almost, but yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Try to push those shapes, and yeah, I think figure out how you're gonna do these detail pieces. You know, me again, I would maybe start in Maya, get all these flaps and pieces of cloth and belts and stuff. But once again, whatever's most comfortable for you in your workflow. So keep going. Good job.